I'm Dave Price, and this is the American Farmland Owner Podcast. Not the place for sound bites. These are real, in-depth conversations with industry leaders. And this week, it's Mike Naig. He's a Northwest Iowa farm boy from a town of about 100 people where corn, beans, and pork were his early life. He's been a leader in the Iowa Department of Agriculture for the past decade and the Secretary of Agriculture since 2018. And that political science degree that he got in college helps him in the world of politics and probably sniff out those presidential wannabes who come through the state trying to BS their way about agriculture. Now, the spread of bird flu obviously has his attention, but like always, so does the weather, and that's where we start. You watch a lot of things. What is your biggest headache right now? What concerns you the most about the industry?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's spring, so we always have to talk about the most important thing that affects spring, which is weather, and of course we can't control it. So you got to at least talk about it and acknowledge that. I love to say, agriculture is really, you can put things in two buckets: things you can control and things you can't control, and it all impacts you. But weather, of course, hot, very much on our minds as we head into spring. I'd say the biggest kind of issue that's been occupying our time, that is frankly an evolving issue, is around this issue of high-path avian influenza being detected in dairy. And we've been thinking a lot about foreign animal diseases, and high-path avian influenza with poultry, African swine fever, foot and mouth disease. This is different. This is where you've got something that has crossed over to a different species, which is not completely unheard of. It's just that it's happening in a pretty broad way. It's an animal health issue, to be sure. It's not a human health issue, and it's not a food safety issue. So, boy, it's one that we're really it's really pushing our team to have to call on our networks of people that we know, work with other states, work with the USDA. But to be honest, that's the maybe the biggest issue of the last few weeks that has really occupied our time, and well, it's still an emerging issue.
So how'd you navigate your way through this the last couple of years when this bird flu was largely bird flu? So you're culling millions of primarily chickens, but turkeys as well. But I mean, millions and millions of birds here, right? Like how are you communicating with farmers and producers to get through that process, and what was that like?
Yeah, you got to go back to 2015, which was the first time that we really had a widespread. It was at that time it was the largest foreign animal disease outbreak in U.S. history. Iowa was really ground zero for that. We're the largest egg producing state in the nation by a stretch, and also have significant turkey production, top 10 in turkey production. So we've got a lot of birds that are impacted. And what we learned coming out of 2015 was collectively, and I would say we learned it, other states learned it, USDA learned it, and the industry learned it. We didn't act fast enough. We didn't depopulate those affected sites quick enough. What you ended up with, and biosecurity was not where it needed to be. So you ended up with the virus moving from farm to farm to farm through a variety of means. And we ended up with a significant outbreak in the state of Iowa. Fast forward, so we learned those lessons. We completely updated our plans. We've been doing exercises every year. We've added some experience, some professional staff here at the department specifically to look at FADs, and really just tried to raise the game. Industry learned all the biosecurity lessons, did some major upgrading there. Fast forward to 2022 when it emerges again, which is now the largest outbreak in U.S. history, is this last 2 years. All of those lessons got applied, and we still had an outbreak in the state of Iowa, but they were independent wild bird introductions on those farms. The virus was not moving farm to farm. Frankly, a huge success, but still an economic burden for those producers who are affected. So the way this works is you have USDA is involved because, frankly, they're paying the bills for the depopulation indemnity and the cleanup. There's also trade implications, and so the federal government has to be involved. State governments, the state of Iowa gets involved directly and provides a lot of the legwork on the ground, and the industry has to own, for farmers themselves, those companies have to own a significant amount of this work. So really, it's those three entities working together. And the time when you prepare, the magic here is that you don't start talking on day one of an outbreak. It's the work you've been doing in the preceding years and months. And that made all the difference as we came into the last couple of years. Didn't make it easy, but people knew what to expect. And we had worked through kind of the plans and the different scenarios. So we were much better prepared the second time around.
Okay, so then fast forward to just several weeks back, you find out this is now dairy cattle are dealing with this. So what's going through your head, because it had largely been confined?
Yeah, well, what you immediately look. So first of all, spring season, wild birds flying north. We sort of expect that we could very well see. We know that the virus is still circulating in that wild population. So frankly, we're expecting, and we wouldn't be a bit surprised. Even today, I would tell you that I won't be surprised if we do see a poultry site that breaks with this, because it's just what's happened the last 2 years, and it wouldn't be surprising at all. What is unique about this is that you had it move from birds into dairy. Not that viruses like this haven't jumped over species barriers before. It's just that when it did, it got into a dairy system that then has spread, and I think you've got 8 states that now have confirmed cases, and boy, that just changes the dynamic. Oh, by the way, you also have some poultry sites that are breaking simultaneously, and so you've got this. I would just say it's a little bit messy in that you're trying to sort all that out. What's connected to what? The big concern for us would be, could dairy possibly reinfect poultry, or what might the swine interaction be? Because you can go to parts of Iowa where I can put you next to a very large dairy, next to a very large egg producer, next to a very large swine producer, all within pretty close proximity. And so for us, that cross species interaction is really important. I just also want to note that this is a animal health issue, but it's not a food safety issue, because dairy industry's got well established protocols to divert milk from sick animals. This is just it's new and unique, but it's the same protocol kicks into place, and it's really not a human health issue. You have had one confirmed case of high path in humans, but it was a dairy worker at one of the affected sites. It's kind of logical that that could happen, but you are not hearing about spread from person to person. If that were the case, then this would take on a whole other level of importance. But right now, that's not what we're seeing.
Do you have any concerns in raw milk? Where it's been detected has been pasteurized, right?
Yeah, so raw milk is a concern, to be candid. So it's actually the testing has been done on the raw milk, meaning it's from the time it's been that's in the milking parlor between there and pasteurization. That's where you're able to detect this virus is in the milk. A lot of that work has continues to be done up at Iowa State University at the vet diagnostic lab, and then across town at the NVSL USDA facility. But what we are finding, and again, there's 100 years of evidence that points to this, is that pasteurization will largely take care of that virus and any other viruses or bacteria that have been causing foodborne illnesses for years. And so if that milk, even if it's from a positive herd, is making it through pasteurization, there's a high level of success, and it's safe to drink. Now, if somebody is consuming raw milk from an affected dairy, I think you could very well have some challenges. And again, that's where you take an animal health issue and make it a human health issue, is when you don't pay attention to those important procedures, or take it seriously and try to prevent the further spread. So that's why it pays to be focused on these things and be prepared.
You are a farm boy, still farm. I'm assuming mostly on the weekends, since we know what your 9 to 5 is. You've been on the job for a while now, and I'm curious what has that been like, kind of having to take a broader view of everything? Especially we're talking about something super serious here that threatens people's livelihoods when you're talking about putting down millions of birds.
Yeah, it's been first of all, I sometimes can't believe I'm doing this. I never would have expected to do it. I've been thinking a little bit. As my predecessor, Bill Northey, passed away at a early young age, shocking passing here earlier this year. But Bill and I would sometimes talk, whether it was when he was here and I was working for him, or when he then went on to USDA as an undersecretary, and I was here following him or even in his new role as he was over at Agribusiness Association as the CEO, it's kind of one of those deals where you'd say, I wouldn't have had a chance to even know about a certain set of issues had I not been in a role like this. I find it the most thrilling and sometimes the most challenging or maddening part of the job is, but you are always learning and trying to have that broader view. So what I like to say is my footprint, my basis in our farm in Northwest Iowa, corn, soybean, grew up swine, farrow to finish operation. Having a dad and an uncle who like to talk to me and tell me what they think, I should be doing, or ideas they have, or just reminding me of what it was like when they were younger, that keeps me grounded. But it is something that I do have to sit in this chair as secretary in the state of Iowa and look across that whole spectrum: crop production, livestock production, processing, and everything that goes with that. It's a great spot to be. I mean, Iowa's position in agriculture really is unmatched. We're really proud of what we have here, and it drives our economy. But it can be challenging at times to try to balance all of that out across all of our really strong sectors that we have in the state.
Can the smaller family farms, is there still a future there?
Absolutely. And in fact, it's some interesting trend lines that came out of the most recent USDA ag census. We were one of, I believe, 4 or 5 states that actually added farms, increased the number of farms. Even our, and we had an increase in that really kind of bucked the national trend of an increase in smaller farms. And the average age of the Iowa farmer, while it did go up, and it's in the upper, it's 58 plus, but we didn't increase at the same rate as the rate did nationally. And so that tells me there's some good things happening. Largely, we would attribute some of that younger next generation activity to folks that have gotten involved in livestock production, and that's a way for the next generation to get into agriculture. But we're also seeing, and it's kind of a convergence of a growing trend line of folks wanting to shop local, buy local, understand where their food comes from. Smaller producers who are looking for, maybe I can't get access to a lot of land, but I can get a few acres, grow a high margin crop, and get a start. Try to generate some revenue. Try to gain access to a market and supply that local demand. I'm really excited about what that can mean. So I think that local drive. We've launched a new program called Choose Iowa. It's our state branded program for Iowa grown, Iowa made, Iowa raised. You're going to see a big expansion of that. But also livestock continues to be a really an opportunity for the younger generation to get involved. High interest rates and higher cost of everything, building materials included, has been a headwind in that sense. But we would expect things to normalize at some point, and that once again will be a very, very attractive way for folks to get in.
A couple of weeks ago, you were there in person when Iowa's governor signed into law some new restrictions when it comes to, and requirements when it comes to foreign ownership of farmland. And as you well know, Iowa already had a law on the books that goes back several decades here that is viewed outside this state as one of the toughest in the nation. Why was this additional level necessary?
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, big issue, right? As you've read, in the ag news, ag media, well, really in the general media as well, as hearing about foreign entities, maybe adversaries, who were buying farm ground and buying maybe farm ground next to military installations. And, rightfully so, I would hear about this a lot when I would travel the state of Iowa, which I do extensively. And yeah, you kind of get into it and you talk to folks, you say, well, where's that happening? Well, it's happening in other states. You say, there's a reason it's not happening here. And that's because in 1979, the legislature and Governor Ray at the time had the vision to say, this is something that we should be protective of. And again, it's specific to farm ground. We have many foreign-owned entities in the state of Iowa. Great companies, great employers, make things that we need. We love that. We want that kind of activity here. What we should not have is a foreign entity competing with our farmers and farming ground into perpetuity. So we said, well, let's look at this. We've got a good law on the books. It prohibits foreign ownership of farm ground. It allows for, an entity to come in and buy up to 320 acres, as long as it's going to be converted into something non-ag, build a factory or facility. It allows a research exemption, which again is important. So companies can do that and own land but do research. But you cannot compete with farmers is the point, and or at least that farm ground should be owned by Americans. And we had a strong law, but there were some question marks, which is, well, how do you know, and do you have the tools to enforce it? So those were really the things that we've honed in on. The bill that passed and the governor signed increases some of the reporting requirements, but it also then allows or gives the Secretary of State, Paul Pate, a responsibility to then produce a report on that every year, which is good. Gives the Attorney General, Brenna Bird, subpoena power. She has the ability to now go investigate, look, request information, ownership documents, financial records, but she didn't have before. And then strengthened the penalties to continue to serve as a deterrent. So I think what it did is it just strengthened an already strong law, and I think it continues to serve as a model, frankly, for other states.
Were you aware of anything screwy going on leading up to this, where somebody was trying to do something? As you know, you can kind of play around with shell companies or whatever to try to get around rules and laws. Were you aware of anybody sniffing around trying to do something?
No, I mean, no suspicion really, but you just nailed it. That's the point, which is, and you could end up with an LLC behind an LLC behind, and those things are fine. They're not. That's, some people refer to those as loopholes. That's law. That's Iowa's law. It allows for those things. What it does not allow is for a foreign entity to be a part of that ownership. And so that's where what we needed to do to say and to assure Iowans, because this is important to Iowans. Believe me, I'm hearing about it. Is that our Attorney General has the tools that she needs to go investigate, ask those questions, get those records. But the honest answer is no. I've not been hearing, other than a general concern, and frankly, hearing about what's happening in some other states. I think it just drove home that this is not something that we want to be. We don't want to be passive about this. We want to be vigilant, and let's ensure that we can continue to say we have the best laws. It's still true that just half of the states in the U.S. have prohibitions like this in place. It's just interesting to look across the country. National Ag Law Center has done a great job with some background and research on this. Gives a history of the whole thing going back to the Revolutionary War and times where this has been more of an issue than others. So I think it's been fascinating to dig into it. We're in a really good spot here.
What is the learning curve? You're in a position where every 4 years or so you have presidential candidates coming through town. They come from a variety of backgrounds, right? Yeah. And you're a guy in a position where they want to have that private meeting with you, kind of talk your ear, maybe see if you'll support them, what have you. How do you talk to them? I would presume that some of them have a decent working knowledge of the industry. Other ones probably Googled it before they showed up in your office. I mean, how do you have these conversations, and how do you sniff out whether somebody's BSing you?
Oh, I love it. It is. Frankly, it's sort of fun to watch and observe and do visits with presidential candidates. Get a little a little look behind the scenes, if you will. But yeah, it is interesting. Look, I would always say, governors typically governors come with at least a sense of how a department works and what a role for a state is. But everybody's agriculture is different. I mean, really, it's just unique. And so, no, nobody really ever shows up knowing exactly, what really makes Iowa tick. But I love to be able to give folks kind of a briefing on, or, here's why ethanol really is a big deal. Half of our corn is first processed at an ethanol plant, and you get a chance to kind of talk about that and walk people through. And some are clearly interested, others are trying to kind of get to the next thing. And but I always view that as that's one of the most important things that I can do, is that I didn't endorse in this last presidential contest specifically for that reason, which is I wanted to be sure that every candidate that wanted to talk to me and that I got a chance to maybe do a tour with or have a round table with, that my job was to try to raise the issues that matter to Iowans, and try to put those candidates in a position where when they get asked these questions, they've had a chance to think about a thoughtful answer. that's what you want to have happening all across the state. Is somebody's going to pop up and ask you a question when you're at the pizza ranch, and better to have thought about some of these things. So, and by the way, one of these people going to be the leader of the free world, and you just like them to be able to think back to something that they learned about or picked up when they were traveling the state of Iowa. And I think that's a responsibility, frankly, that we have as Iowans, is to kind of plant those seeds that we may have to come back to later in an administration.
What about Congress as you look? We'll see if they're going to do a new farm bill this year. Didn't get it done last year. As you look at this, what do they absolutely have to protect and keep strong? And I appreciate you're watching all kinds of stuff, but is there something in particular that you're concerned about?
It's so interesting with the farm bill. Every 5 years they're supposed to be doing one, and there's
Supposed
so
to,
much
yeah.
turnover from it's supposed to be. Every time it seems like there's a lot of turnover, and there's more and more with every redistricting. There's more congressional districts that have zero farm ground, and so I get asked a lot about why is there the food supplemental nutrition piece with farm policy? Well, the practical reality is, while we would love to be able to debate those two issues separately, the fact is, if you want to pass farm policy, you're probably going to have to attract some votes for folks that don't have a lot of agriculture in their district, and there's got to be a reason for that. And so, while it can be maddening, and 85+% of the budget that's authorized in a farm bill is SNAP related, it's got a history, and there's a reason for that history of linking those things together. As it comes to the farm bill this year, or the one that we're in extra innings on, I've kept referring to this as more of this is an evolutionary farm bill, not a revolutionary farm bill, right? You'll hear that mantra, meaning that really needs significant changes. What we really just need is, the world has changed in 5-6 years since the last bill was written. There are some reference prices that need to be updated, those types of things, and so it needs to be modernized. And yes, add in some new things that we've learned, along the way. But mostly, it needs to stay the same, but be reauthorized and updated. It's all for us. It's always, again, the way I kind of started. There's things you can control and things you can't control. For the things you can control, you need to work harder, educate yourself, be better, get experience, just do it better than the next person, that kind of a thing. And that's in your control. Then there's this whole bucket of things that you can't: weather, severe weather, droughts, floods, and global conditions, marketplace. This is a global marketplace, and I can't control. No individual farmer can control what's largely happening in the international marketplace. And so what you say is, well, you need risk management tools to help you manage through those types of things. And so, again, on the crop side, it's crop insurance is probably the most important. And on the animal side, it would be, everything from the research that we still need to be done around foot and mouth disease vaccine and ASF vaccine. There's a whole range of things. But to me, it comes down to, the most important things are the risk management tools that our farmers need to try to give them a fighting chance to manage through the stuff that they can't control themselves.
Do you expect that there will be increasing pressure to start reducing some of the money we spend in that world? You've undoubtedly seen the House Republican Study Committee, what they put out. I mean, like you're talking about crop insurance, those are some of the areas that they want to knock down some. Do you think that will that pressure increase as we look at a $35 trillion upcoming collective debt?
This is where then you go back, and this can be an upside too, to looking at that whole farm bill that includes the food components, which is, are you kidding me? You're going to go try to shave dollars and squeeze the crop insurance side of this, the risk management side of this, when we've got this whole huge bucket that we could talk about over here. I mean, I think that should be about context. And look, it seems like every time that we come around this subject on the farm bill, yeah, you're in there fighting for dollars and trying to balance all of that out. I would say yes. Unfortunately, crop insurance is always sort of under the microscope and under pressure. But this is where you do the hard work of advocating for that. And by the way, show the numbers. This is another one where you say, well, proof's in the pudding, right? I mean, this has worked. This has served U.S. agriculture very well for many decades, and let's keep a good thing going. So, you can definitely put me in the concerned camp, but I would be concerned every time, meaning don't take it for granted. So we've got some really important and strong voices on this topic. Certainly, it doesn't hurt that the 2/3 of the Iowa congressional delegation are on the farm bill writing committees, meaning we've got 2 representatives and both of our senators on their respective agriculture committees. And these are the things that's why they're there, and that's why they're pushing so hard on those types of things.
We appreciate the time. Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's Iowa Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Naig. We hope you'll sign up for the weekly American Farmland Owner newsletter where farm owners get their news. Comes right to your email inbox, and it's free. Just go to AmericanFarmlandOwner.com to sign up. I'm Dave Price. Thanks for connecting.